that range is important to recognize because a woman maybe in her late 40s who goes to her doctor is like, I was feeling fine until like a few weeks ago, and now things are starting to bother me, and I'm anxious, and I'm not sleeping, and I'm sweating at night. And, to recognize that can be the beginning of the menopausal period, the perimenopause.
Welcome to Coach Soul, the podcast where we explore therapeutic ways to the best versions of ourselves. I'm your host, Steve Hudgins. I'm a licensed professional counselor dedicated to helping you navigate life's challenges. In each uplifting episode, we'll discuss mental health, relationships, self-care, emotional well-being, and personal growth. Join me and with my co-host, Kenya Evelyn, a therapeutic life coach, where sometimes we'll even welcome special guests to our show that share their experience and expertise. So let's embark on this transformative path together and discover a healthier and happier you. What a fun last podcast we had, and we just ended by taking your breath away by doing the box breathing that Navy SEALs do of inhaling by 4, we hold by 4, we exhale by 4, and we hold by 4, and we repeat the cycle again. And so, Bonnie, welcome back to the show. And I think that's so important. What you talked about is the modality. One of the things that I think I got too excited and forgot about is the fact I remember having a client who was just a recipe of a melting pot of disaster of anxiety. She claimed she had a normal childhood. Her husband verified yes. And so I'm like, okay, let's do something else. I'm more of a holistic therapist than I think outside the box. And so I got to thinking, menopause, diabetes, keto diet. Now you're depleting serotonin and dopamine levels, which you're needing some hormone type stuff. She went to her first couple of doctors. They didn't know what I was talking about. She went to OBGYN, gave her a patch, and 4 weeks later, Steve, I'm normal. I said, imagine that. Sometimes, I don't hear as much when I talk to the ladies that they didn't think about it. So you're talking about maintenance and stuff. How does that the hormonal piece for women, so our listeners who are listening, especially the young audience of females, can understand when they hit menopause and they're feeling so anxious that sometimes it may not just be whatever. Sometimes it's the hormones. Do you care to share for a little bit?
Sure. I can certainly share on that subject. Yes, hormones are complicated. And I, for 25 years-ish, I taught 7th grade at the beginning of the hormone highway, at which kids are...
Yes.
They don't actually know who's going to show up. That happens to us, and it happens to men too. But especially... Yep. When we reach, sometimes it's mid to late 40s, sometimes it's not till early 60s. And that range is important to recognize because a woman maybe in her late 40s who goes to her doctor is like, I was feeling fine until like a few weeks ago, and now things are starting to bother me, and I'm anxious, and I'm not sleeping, and I'm sweating at night. And, to recognize that can be the beginning of the menopausal period, the perimenopause. But as you talked about this client who came into you who just was on fire, I had that experience. And because I was very regulated on the birth control pill for 25 years, no problem. So eventually an OBGYN says, well, you're getting a little long in the tooth. We should probably take you off of that. I was like, I'm not sure I want to do that, but okay. So she did. And unfortunately, the support to ratchet that down slowly wasn't there. And the drop in what I was supplied with by this medical person was so significant that I absolutely felt like, and I described in our first episode, how crazy I felt when my anxiety disorder was off the handle. I started feeling like that again. I was facing the school year starting. I said, there's no way I can deal with 37th graders. And I can't. I stopped eating I lost 13 pounds in 2 weeks. I was shaking. I was crying. I actually caused a car accident because I fainted while driving. All because I followed this advice that this is what we should do now. And I remember calling her and saying, I started getting a period. That's weird. And she goes, well, let's just see if you regulate. No, I wasn't going to regulate. Heck no, that's not what happened. So then for my personal world, I went outside of the medical community and went to bioidentical hormone therapy. That was the choice that I decided to try. And for me, that has worked. And for some people, what's available in the medical community, the estradiol mix that if we took it down a little more slowly, would probably work just fine. And I know it does work for some women that feel good. And the patch, as you mentioned, that is one of the ways of regulating. But dysregulated hormones can change a person's personality completely. I didn't know who I was during that maybe 2 weeks of, wow, this changed everything for me. And then when I got my hormonal mix regulated properly, back to even keel. It was an interesting, it was terrible when it happened. And thank goodness no one was injured in the accident, although it cost me some cash. But I'm thankful for the experience because I know how bad it can be. So when someone comes to me dealing with anxiety, and I'm like, oh no, you're not crazy. Don't let anybody tell you you're crazy.
Sure.
Or you're imagining this, because I remember exactly what that was like. Terrifying.
One of the things that I'm thankful that you are living and the other person is too, right? Because that could be a dangerous situation. Oftentimes, some medication can cause or increase anxiety. Now, I need to put a plug in here to our listeners. Bonnie and I are not medical doctors. I am more of a doctor of behavioral science that deals with mental health. Well, don't you deal with drugs? I'm not a licensed drug dealer, so I'm not a psychiatrist or a pharmacist. But what we're talking about is that these are things that worked for her and my client. We're not suggesting that you do this without any consultation of a physician. So please, if you find this interesting, go see an expert, a medical doctor, or somebody as a herbologist or whatever you feel is comfortable for you to make those choices and decisions, because we don't want things to happen to you that can be worse. So here you are, you get regulated. You talk about some maintenance that's happening. I mean, you teach. Did you just stop teaching? Because I had an aunt that had the same thing and she quit teaching altogether because it just got so much.
Well, because I was fortunate to find the hormonal solution for myself within a few weeks, I was able to start to feel on keel again. It took a little time, but I was able to get ready when the kids showed up for the beginning of the school year. I didn't feel like I had felt about 3 weeks prior to that. So I'm glad it didn't happen in the middle of the school year, because that would have been really bad. But, I started to regulate and feel like myself again and started eating again, which was very helpful, because when you're anxious, if you don't eat, that makes it worse. You don't want to deplete your calories. So, I was able to get right back into it. And I did another, 5 years or so. And I just retired from public ed and staff coaching last year.
So, Bonnie, I mean, here you go through this and you're not out of retirement. You got into something totally different for yourself. We talked a little bit about EFT tapping and other things like that. And with EMDR, I would, take imagery with my clients, and I changed EMDR a little bit where I helped them to relax and to go with EMDR to think about. I did it on myself. I did the imagery, walking down the path in the woods, the sunshine, the warmth. I envisioned like I was actually there. And that's funny because that's what drew me to you, because you created something that's unique that helped. You want to talk about that?
Sure, yeah. So in 2005, I created wildlife imagery and trademarked that as a therapeutic modality. And like you're talking about getting in your mind into that place in nature where you go walking with the dog and all a happy place, maybe some people would call it, right? Sometimes I'm out in my kayak in my head and I'm picking blueberries on the side of a lake. Yeah. So specifically, when I was a kid, like 8 years old or so, and I started to really understand a little bit about what was going on, familial situation, the stress and the anger and the fear and all the stuff of living in my family, I read Charlotte's Web, right? Like almost every single person read.
Yes. Or saw the movie.
Saw the movie, read the book. So fabulous. It's been around forever. And Charlotte was a spider in a barn that a girl named Fern, who I wanted to be me, was spending all her time in the barn with the animals. And Charlotte's up in the corner in her web. And here comes this pig. His name is Wilbur. And he's cute and adorable and little. But when he grows up, he's going to be Christmas dinner. He finds out from the gossipy goose who's leaned over the fence and said, "Hey, don't get too comfortable because you're going to be dinner." Mm-hmm. So when he hears that, he runs around having a panic attack. And Charlotte's like, "Oh my gosh, okay, calm down. I'll help you." So she starts writing complimentary adjectives about him in her web, which of course the people see. And then they think the pig is magical and all the things. So Charlotte, for me, was my first wildlife guide. Like, Charlotte has got it figured out. She's someone I can attach to help me stay grounded. When I'm thinking this as a little kid. So when I would get into fearful moments and situations would occur, I'd go to Charlotte. Like, "Charlotte, get me through this." And I think of words that she would come up with. And it was a big fantasy, when little kids have an imaginary friend, right? Charlotte was mine. So later on in life, as I mentioned previously, I was a very sensitive kid, very attached to animals and nature. Still am. It's always where I want to be. Sure. And I started studying a little bit about indigenous shamanism and the powers and medicines of certain animals and birds and the animals in the ocean and insects and how they can help us to ground ourselves. And I got really attached. I was attached to horses. I was introduced to horses face to face when I was 10, and that completely changed my life. Like, everything changed. Every day after that I wasn't in school, I was at the barn working and developing and, becoming a trail guide and teaching lessons and all the things, and talking to the horses, right? They were there to talk to. But that nature piece and my love for dogs, we always had dogs when I was a kid, had me thinking about wolves, and pretty soon horse and wolf. Wolf for protection, horse for power and grace. And I would just imagine them sometimes and think about them. And I thought, this is something I can help people with. When I had to go for an MRI during the throes of my younger years, when my anxiety was off the charts, I had to go for an MRI. You ever been at an MRI? It's a tube. Your entire body goes in the tube. There's all this loud banging. You can't get up and walk away. Not good for someone who's anxious. And I really didn't want to have to take drugs to do that. So I decided I was going to take my horse and my wolf in with me. And I talked to them. I kept my hands in wolf fur and stroking that silky coat on the horse and the soft muzzle and talking to them. And I just held on to them. And I was able to do that process without drugs.
I love that imagery. When you said wolf is one of my favorites. And you talk about horses, and a movie came to mind. It's an old Matthew Broderick movie of 1985 called Lady Hawk. And it's a romantic movie of the two were cursed. By day, he's a knight on his horse, and she is a wolf. And by night, he turns into a hawk, and she's the hawk by day. He's the man. And then at night. And so it took an eclipse to break that curse. And so, that's some imagery there too, because we tend to separate or dissonance ourselves from our anxiety too. And so I think, Bonnie, you bring a good point to how do we confront our anxiety? What are things, talk a little bit more about how you were able to develop this. And you're the first lady I've ever met that's not afraid of a spider. So that is awesome, and then get into what was it that you developed into your book?
Well, the book is a memoir of how I discovered the roots of my anxiety and started taking a path out of that for myself. And at the end of each of the chapters, I add reflections and a mantra and action steps. And it is a printable journal here that comes with it. Kind of work through a path similar to mine that is their own. But I did explain pretty clearly in a couple of the chapters how wildlife imagery and horses in particular keep me going each day. So I had the horse and wolf, as I told you, in the MRI machine. Yeah. And then I realized there was more to that. So over years and over time, this isn't simplistic. And I don't tell people, oh, this is an animal you should, or this is an environment you should.
Right.
I help them discover what is right for them. But I have 6 wild guides that are with me all the time. And anytime I need someone to talk to, and there either isn't a human nearby, or I don't want to talk to another human about what's going on, I talk to animals, I talk to trees. But these 6 wild guides, I can just close my eyes and conjure them up. Now, there's wolf and horse. There's dragonfly for transformation. There is bighorn sheep to help me keep stepping up into higher planes, higher levels that I need to reach. And I like spiders and snakes. Snake is out front clearing the path for me the whole way. And hawk is out front above helping me see the greater picture. So that whole, I feel encompassed by all these medicines, all these strengths and powers that I need, and I can ask for them to help me at any time. So if I get stressed, like sometimes I don't like flying. I do it, but I don't always like it.
Right.
And I'll something will trigger me, a little bumpity bump will go on, and I'll be like, okay, guys, can you just please hold me in this space? And immediately I'm, right? I use the box breathing. I use the EFT tapping. I use the Jin Shin Jitsu holds. But this community of wildlife is always right with me when I need help to settle myself down and to go forward in my power.
I think it's so important that we can find a healthy way. I am probably the only therapist that believes I don't like coping skills. And here's why. You're already coping with alcoholism. You're already coping with your anxiety or substance abuse, those type of things. And so we say, okay, let's use a healthy coping skill. Well, we're trading an unhealthy for another healthy, but we're not confronting the issue. And that's the only caveat that I would have to say is that let's get rid of this unhealthy by let's confronting fear, which is the root of anger and anxiety. And oftentimes how we think it's so easy to manifest yourself in a panic attack. When I was going to college and we went spelunking, for those that don't know that old term, that is going cave exploring where the cave is not commercialized. These are 7 miles in Oklahoma. I thought that part of Oklahoma is flat because it's near the panhandle of Texas. How are you getting 7 miles of caves? So in college, there was 12 of us that went, and I'm like, wow. So we wanted to split off, and some guys went up this round tunnel. Some creeped this way and some creeped this way. And I said, I'm going to hold it together for you. And so they did. And my light went out and it was pitch black. And I'm like, I'm underground. There is no cell phone service. I had to tell myself to relax, to breathe, remain calm. I was able to replace my light. And as soon as I did, about 5 minutes later, everybody starts coming back together, exploring. Some went up to the tunnel, found a porcupine's nest, and others went into a nice little cavern. And so it's about when you're in that moment, it's like how go to the bathroom. I mean, you got to go to the bathroom. You feel the pressure. How do you get hungry? Your stomach tells you. Your anxiety also tells you. And it's about putting a filter in place. Just got to be mindful. Talk to yourself. Breathe. And so here you are with this imagery you're creating, and you get into the book. For the remainder of the 6 minutes that we have, let's talk about some of these practical tips that are in your book. And do you have the book with you so that we can show the listeners and our audience that watches YouTube, they can see the book. Towards the end, Bonnie will share her website so that you can go to it. And that way, I think, people with experience, I think, is the best because they've been there, done that. That's what got me into therapy. I've been there, done that, was a telecom engineer. I did engineering of the networking. Now I'm doing the engineering of the minds and training other people, which is, I really enjoy it. So kind of share a little bit about your practical tips so that our listeners and viewers can understand what you mean by your practical tips.
Okay, great. Let me go back to the beginning and help people understand what a crazy maker is from there. Okay. So here is the cover of my very easy to access, no jargon book called Cracking the Crazy Maker's Code, 9 Simple Steps to Ease Your Anxiety. And the simple steps of the printable journal built inside that you could use to work your own path out like I did. But so I just want to read this little smidge about what a crazy maker is.
Go for it.
What exactly are crazy makers? Sometimes crazy makers are the people who raised us or with whom we lived or worked. They can also be unhealthy belief systems from generations before us that code negativity and fear in us, or they can be traumas we've endured or witnessed that hold us hostage in our pain. The crazy maker's code is the sum of negativity you've been taught to believe about yourself. This code may have defined and created your sense of self-worth from an early age, but it serves no purpose in your current life or reality. The good news is that code can be broken, and you can free yourself from the crazy makers that hold you back so you can begin living your very best life. So in addition to my own book, I also share with folks on my website the handbook of Jin Shinjitsu that I use daily to help myself when I have any kind of stuck block anywhere in my body or mind. And it's called The Power to Heal Myself by Betty Jean Wall. It's written in a very easy to understand language with diagrams of what the holds are on the body. And I couldn't ever imagine myself in the past selling a book that someone else wrote. But this, that much to me, I use it every day. It's a practical handbook, just like my book is a practical path to start moving yourself out of being stuck from anxiety. So, you asked about sort of how one gets from point A to point B, maybe.
Right.
As stuck as I was to where I am now. And it is those practical strategies. And therapy was helpful, and talking to somebody when I was finally able to do that. But I remember being unable to talk to any people. And I had Charlotte, and I had my horses and my dogs and the other animals. I would talk to them in my mind. And then when I started expressing aloud, out in nature, I would talk to trees. Trees are non-judgmental, and they won't walk away when you're talking to them. So I showed
the leaving they do is their leaves dropping. That's the only leave they do. They're stuck in the ground. So
that's right.
That is, great imagery there.
Yeah,
It's Eleni. We got about 4 or 5 minutes left, and I think it's remarkable how here's this anxiety, and people have seemed to lose hope. We're living in this culture that's fear-mongering by our news television stations that make you fear-monger. They don't tell you the entire truth. They try to give you half-truths to scare you into things. And so I beat to my own drum again. You shut something down and don't explain why. I'm digging. Because I'm talking reference to back in the day of, you know what I mean. You can't say it, or does this get censored and we can't air it? You know what I mean. The doctors weren't allowed to talk. And so I investigate, and I'm like, you know what? People thought I was a conspiracy theorist, and no, it's about taking time for yourself. Understand what truth is. Somewhere I heard that truth is what sets you free. And that is so true in our anxiety, because when we come to truth, it helps us. And you found some truth for you. Your truth might not work for everybody, but you know what? It's worth a shot to look at what Bonnie has done. Here she is, has this living experience. I'm thankful that you talk about your past. And we got into a little bit about the hormonal issue, and the therapy helped, and that you developed your own situation. Bonnie, let's kind of close out. We got about 2 minutes left. Tell them how they can find you. Are you open? Do you do coaching? What is it that people can do? What is your website?
Okay, so you can find me by my name, Bonnie Brindle, which is fairly unique. You won't find a list of people with my same name. On Facebook, you can find me on LinkedIn And you can find me on my website, which is my name, bonniebrindle.com. And if you're looking for a speaker on these subjects, bonniebrindlespeaks.com is how to find my speaker page. And I do work in individual therapy. I am a therapist in Colorado, so I work in individual therapy. I work in individual and group coaching, and I wrote the Crazy Maker's Code, and I'm working on another book for middle school parents, how to survive the middle school years. And yes, and my speaking. So there's all of those pieces together, but very easy to find just by my name, because you'll find that website, bonniebrindle.com, and on the socials, just my name is easy to get. So yeah, I started my therapy practice back in 2005 while I was teaching. I was working as an individual therapist part-time, knowing that I would retire and then go into I had no idea what 2024 was going to actually look like, and how social media and all the pieces,
Right.
the stuff that I've been working hard to learn, but it is not easy. How all that was going to change everything. And there'd be podcasting, and, we'd be talking online. But here it is. So this is what it's morphed into. So still the therapy piece and all the other additions, because again, anxiety is just blocked energy. I have figured out for myself how to move through it, how to manage it when it still comes to visit me now. And I want your audience not to feel like they're alone and not feel hopeless, because I was as deep as you can get and thinking about ending my life. And that's not what happened.
So, I want to encourage our listeners that, as therapists, we're not in competition. We can't save the world. We're not superhuman beings. Sorry to disappoint. We're not genies. We can't make it a go away. But we are here to assist. And so, Bonnie, it has been a pleasure to meet someone like you that is passionate about what they do. Like I'm passionate about families and individuals themselves. And so this is such a high topic that needs to be discussed, because oftentimes people think there is no cure. And here you are living proof of the cure, and now you're an expert of it. So, Bonnie, thank you so much for this time, and we thank you.
Thank you. It was my honor to be with you. Thanks, Steve.
Until next time, take care, and God bless. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on Coach Soul. As we wrap up, we want to remind our listeners of a few key points. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content shared here is based on professional opinion but may not apply to everyone's situation. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before making changes to your mental health care. If you're in a crisis, please seek immediate professional help or contact a crisis hotline. Listening to this podcast does not create a therapist-client relationship. For personal advice, please consult with your licensed mental health professional in your area. Remember, your mental health journey is unique. While we hope this information is helpful, it is crucial to work directly with the qualified personnel for your specific needs. Thank you again for tuning in to Coach Soul, and we'll see you next time.